A poor girl damaged a millionaire's car. What happened next will shock you. Now let me share a true story that took place in a small town in upstate New York. It sounds almost like a fairy tale, but it really happened. Two people from completely different backgrounds met by the strangest circumstances and discovered in each other something no one else had ever noticed. Livia Moore stood outside the Morning Bites bakery, anxiously surveying the cars parked along the narrow street. Moments ago, she'd accidentally brushed against the side mirror of a sleek black sports sedan while carrying a sack of flour from a nearby storage area. She was unsure whether there was a scratch on the paint, but the grating sound of metal on metal had jolted her, filling her with dread. Her heart sank. She worried about how expensive it might be to fix a luxury car. Gathering her courage, she leaned in for a closer look and discovered a noticeable but not too deep scratch on the passenger door. One glance at the vehicle, and you could tell the owner spared no expense on flashy details, and now Livia would likely face an expensive repair. She was already imagining how she'd have to scrape by for months to pay it off. But instead of an angry outburst, she heard a calm male voice say, "Looks like you gave my car a bit of a bump. Are you all right?" Livia looked up to see a tall, well-built man in an expensive business suit. He had the confident posture of someone used to success, and that only heightened her anxiety. She launched into a flurry of apologies, insisting she would cover the cost of repairs, even though she had no idea how she could afford it. Yet the car's owner, whose name was Ethan Caldwell, seemed more intrigued than angry. "Let's talk about it somewhere quieter," he suggested. "Maybe inside your bakery?" The idea of him casually sipping coffee in her bakery seemed almost absurd. Still, Ethan smiled politely, repeating that since they were already there, it wouldn't be a hassle for him to stop by for a few minutes. Collecting the sack of flour from the ground, Livia opened the door to Morning Bites, letting him step inside first, as though ushering him into a gourmet restaurant. She felt acutely self-conscious about everything, but was even more surprised by his calm demeanor. Inside, Livia directed Ethan to a small table by the window, careful not to meet his gaze. He glanced around, noticing the bakery's charming decor. White-tiled walls, wooden tables, small potted plants lining the windowsills. Ethan seemed both curious and impressed by the cozy atmosphere, one he wasn't used to in the high-end venues he typically frequented. "Would you like me to tell you about our pastries?" Livia offered. "Sure," he answered. "See, then we can talk about the car." When Livia returned with a croissant and a latte, she tried to project confidence, as if she regularly served wealthy customers. Observing her every move, Ethan realized she was different from the people he met at his business lunches. There was no pretense in her manner, no forced politeness. He was intrigued by who she was, how she ended up here, what she loved in life. Meanwhile, Livia braced for the worst. "I know it's my fault," she said. "Just tell me how much to pay for the repairs. I can make a down payment and pay you back in installments." Ethan, smiling wryly, shook his head. "I appreciate your honesty, but first, maybe you can tell me what made you choose to work in a bakery and become so passionate about baking." A jolt of surprise shot through Livia. Nobody usually asked such questions. She smiled shyly, trying to hide her embarrassment. "I've loved baking since I was a kid. My grandmother was a pastry chef in a small Florida town, and I always enjoyed helping her." Before she realized it, Livia had spent nearly 40 minutes at the table with Ethan, telling him about moving to New York, her aspirations for expanding the bakery, and the challenges she faced without a wealthy family background. Ethan listened closely, seeming to momentarily forget about his luxury deals and the scratch on his car. By the end of their conversation, he simply said, "We'll sort out the car situation. But tell me, can I stop by tomorrow? Maybe for a morning coffee?" Livia was too startled to refuse. She assumed he might be joking, but his gaze told her he was genuinely interested. Then he handed her a business card printed with Ethan Caldwell and left, giving her a parting nod that somehow confirmed his promise to return and talk again. The next day, Livia arrived at Morning Bites earlier than usual. She wouldn't admit she was excited to see Ethan again, but she couldn't stop thinking about how calmly he'd reacted to her mistake. That evening, her friend Rebecca, who occasionally helped out with baking, noticed Livia's unusual mood. "Maybe you should call this Mr. Expensive Car Guy, just to clarify what's going on," Rebecca suggested. "He was awfully calm about everything." Livia only sighed. He said he'd just dropped by himself. True to his word, Ethan walked in at precisely 8 o'clock the following morning, once again in a business suit, but without the usual folders and briefcase his colleagues carried. He greeted Livia with a polite smile. "Good morning. Anything special on today's menu?" She offered him a freshly baked caramel donut just out of the oven. He nodded appreciatively and asked to sit at the same table as before, acting as though it was already his regular spot. A few customers glanced curiously at the man in a designer suit before returning to their own conversations. Livia, driven by curiosity and lingering worry, decided to ask, "Look, I'm still trying to understand why you were so calm about the scratch. You could have demanded compensation or called the police." Ethan took a bite of the donut, then replied, "I value honesty. You didn't run off, and you didn't deny being responsible. Frankly, most people I deal with would have tried to wriggle out of it." "Well, I guess there aren't many bakers in your circle," Livia joked. "Maybe not," he said, "but I want to learn more about your life. It's more interesting than you think." Livia noticed he wasn't trying to force his worldview on her. He asked about her childhood, her move to the big city. She felt surprisingly comfortable opening up to him. Still, the thought that he might be a millionaire businessman left her uneasy. She worried she could say or do something that would break the fragile understanding between them. Meanwhile, Ethan's life outside the bakery was very different. His circle was made up of well-off individuals, used to power lunches in upscale restaurants and exclusive weekend gatherings. When his family found out about the scratched car, they were skeptical. His younger sister, Sarah Caldwell, with whom he was particularly close, was blunt about the whole thing. "Are you serious about seeing a girl from some bakery?" "She's not just a bakery girl," Ethan calmly corrected. "Why does everyone assume you need a big-name family or a Harvard degree to be worth talking to?" Sarah could only shake her head, surprised at her brother's determination. Their father, who'd inherited a sizable fortune from Ethan's grandfather, expected his son to marry appropriately, someone from a similar social background. Not wanting to spark outright confrontation, Ethan brushed off their concerns with humor. Inside, however, he knew that if his relationship with Livia got serious, he'd face a wave of disapproval from his family. As for Livia, she continued living her usual routine. Mornings at the bakery starting at 5 and finishing late in the evening. But each day, she secretly hoped Ethan would drop by for coffee or at least send a quick text to the phone number she'd ultimately given him. Weeks passed. Customers came and went, and Ethan kept showing up almost every day. Thus began a gradual merging of two distinct worlds, the polished and the down-to-earth, designer suits and aprons dusted with flour. As November settled in, the weather grew colder. It hadn't snowed yet in New York, but there was a chill in the air demanding coats and hats. Livia struggled to find any rest at the bakery. Customers loved her goods, and she was also experimenting with new recipes. Often, while unloading deliveries at the back door, she'd spot Ethan passing by and greeting her warmly, offering a hand with the crates. At some point, she realized she missed him if he didn't drop in. He seemed to know her schedule well enough to be there whenever he could, even if only for a minute between business appointments. "I think it's time you met some of my friends," Ethan casually mentioned one morning. "One of them is hosting a charity event on Saturday. I'd like you to come with me." Livia froze, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are you sure they'll be comfortable with me? I don't even know how I'm supposed to dress for something like that." "I'll help you, don't worry. Just be yourself," Ethan reassured her. Ethan's gentle words warmed her, but Livia still felt a knot of anxiety. She didn't want to stand out like a sore thumb among people who considered her job a mark of low status. Yet a voice inside urged her to give it a try. If Ethan really saw something special in her, why should she hide from his friends? On Saturday, Ethan picked her up in a rented limousine, which made her feel self-conscious. She wore an elegant blue dress borrowed from Rebecca, and even though Ethan insisted she looked wonderful, she couldn't shake her nerves. En route to the venue, an old mansion in the suburbs, the tension built inside her. When they arrived, the driveway was already lined with luxury cars, and well-heeled guests were mingling under glittering chandeliers. Stepping into the grand foyer, Livia felt like she had walked onto a movie set. Huge crystal chandeliers, reflections dancing off polished floors, and servers weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne. She felt intimidated, but tried not to cower behind Ethan. Soon they were surrounded by a group of his acquaintances. Livia heard the usual questions. "What do you do? How long have you known Ethan? Did you go to college together?" Ethan introduced her simply as "my good friend, a very skilled baker." The surprised looks around them made it clear these people hadn't expected him to bring someone outside their circle. Among the guests was Rachel Banks, a friend of the Caldwell family, who many assumed would eventually marry Ethan. She gave Livia a cool, polite smile and asked, "So, have you convinced Ethan to switch to low-calorie pastries? I've never seen him bring someone from outside our set to an event." A wave of anxiety coursed through Livia, but Ethan quickly replied, "Maybe that's exactly why she's more interesting. She isn't from our set. But we're here for a charity event, not to debate social status, right?" Rachel shrugged and disappeared into the crowd. Her contemptuous remark stuck with Livia throughout the evening. She was certain the other guests viewed her as an out-of-place girl in a borrowed dress. But whenever the situation became too overwhelming, Ethan would discreetly squeeze her hand, reminding her that she wasn't alone. That simple gesture confirmed what Livia had begun to suspect. She cared deeply for him. Later that night, after driving Livia home, Ethan asked if the event had disappointed her. She shrugged honestly. "Your world seems like it's from another planet. I don't blame them for not knowing how to see me as anything else. The most important thing is that you're still you." Ethan flashed a quiet smile, more certain than ever that Livia saw him in a way no one from his exclusive social circle ever had. The following weeks passed surprisingly peacefully. Ethan continued to stop by the bakery, sometimes offering financial advice for its expansion. Livia listened gratefully, but hesitated to implement everything, determined to preserve the bakery's cozy, simple vibe. They had dinner sometimes at a small Italian restaurant near Morning Bites, a place Livia found far more appealing than the ritzy lounges Ethan occasionally suggested. But trouble was brewing. Ethan's father, Harold Caldwell, increasingly doubted his son's priorities. He'd heard rumors that Ethan spent a suspicious amount of time at a local bakery, and made it clear that Ethan shouldn't lower his standards. For the Caldwell family, preserving their reputation was paramount. Rachel Banks, who had long set her sights on becoming Ethan's fiancée, grew more hostile. She believed a woman who smelled of flour was beneath the social class Ethan belonged to. One evening, Ethan showed up looking tense and preoccupied. He admitted that his family was pressuring him to walk away from Livia, suggesting she was a poor match for their social standing. Livia hesitated, then asked, "Maybe I really am dragging you down. You could find a more suitable partner anytime you wanted." Ethan's face darkened, and he objected, "Please don't say that. I'm tired of everyone insisting I choose a wife based on my bank account instead of my heart." As the outside pressure mounted, so did the underhanded tactics of people trying to correct Ethan's behavior. One afternoon, a woman burst into the bakery, introducing herself as an old acquaintance of Livia's, accusing her of trying to ensnare a rich fiancé. Livia stood there in shock, unable to respond, as the woman's tirade attracted everyone's attention. She claimed Ethan already had a fiancée, Rachel Banks, and that Livia was just a temporary distraction. While Rebecca hurried over to make the woman leave, the stranger threw a gossip magazine onto the floor. Its pages featured a photo of Ethan and Rachel standing together at some social function, with text hinting that the two families had an unofficial engagement in the works. Livia stared at the picture, feeling as if the fragile bond she and Ethan had formed was shattering. When Ethan arrived at the bakery that evening, completely unaware of the incident, he found Livia distraught. The magazine lay open on the counter. Ethan gave a bitter smile, explaining that Rachel was just a family friend, and that talk of a pending wedding was fueled by people who favored an advantageous union for both families. But seeing Livia on the verge of tears, he realized how damaging such rumors could be. "I'll handle it," Ethan said softly. "Nobody gets to insult you." "But why are they so determined for you to marry her?" Livia asked, upset. Ethan sighed heavily. "Because it's profitable for both families. Money, business deals, status. In my world, sometimes they treat marriage like a business arrangement, but I won't let them force me into anything." He tried to put his arms around her, but she pulled away. It stung to think that all she'd ever wanted was an honest life doing the work she loved. Yet she now had to fight off accusations of being a gold digger. "Isn't there a simpler way to live?" she murmured, staring off. "Or am I the one complicating everything?" "Neither of us is to blame," Ethan answered. "It's everyone else who believes relationships should be guided by business contracts, not genuine emotion." Yet the outburst in the bakery affected Livia more than she cared to admit. Customers whispered about the incident. Local gossips spread the story to nearby shops. Livia feared everyone was judging her. She seriously considered ending the relationship, if only to escape the humiliation. But she also knew that giving up would mean admitting that love belongs solely to the wealthy and powerful. Christmas was approaching, and Morning Bites was preparing special holiday pies and cookies. Livia buried herself in work to keep her mind off the rumors. Ethan tried to stay composed, visiting the bakery as often as before, but Livia sensed the ongoing tension with his family. One snowy afternoon, about a week before Christmas, Ethan showed up visibly tired yet resolute. He asked Livia to step outside with him, where snow was falling softly. "I've ended all the so-called arrangements regarding our family's business politics," he told her. "I'm not going to be pressured into a loveless marriage. My father is furious, but I told him I'm choosing my future wife on my own." Livia's heart pounded at the idea that Ethan might lose much of his inheritance. But he continued, "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," he clarified gently. "We both need time to strengthen what we have and learn to fully trust each other. But I want you to know that I'm not giving up on us." He paused, meeting her gaze. Livia, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions, realized she was looking at a genuine person who, despite his considerable wealth, acted like an ordinary guy simply wanting to be with someone he cared for. From that moment, the situation took a different turn. Mr. Harold Caldwell refused to speak to his son at first. Ethan's friends split into two camps, those applauding his courage and those calling it a foolish, romantic whim. But Ethan seemed unfazed by the criticism. He focused on his work and on supporting Livia. More and more often, he came to the bakery in simple jeans and a casual jacket instead of a tailored suit, as if he wanted to bridge the gap between their worlds. Livia occasionally asked whether he regretted the upheaval. He consistently answered that she was worth the struggle. His steady confidence boosted her own sense of worth. With him around, she felt she no longer needed to hide away in her bakery, fearful of outside judgment. One day, to everyone's surprise, Harold Caldwell himself walked into Morning Bites. Livia nearly dropped a tray of cupcakes upon seeing him. Tall and imposing, with an air of authority, he nonetheless looked somewhat lost in these unpretentious surroundings. He and Ethan spoke quietly at a corner table, their expressions indicating a serious discussion. Occasionally, Harold threw a glance Livia's way, and she pretended to be occupied with her duties. Eventually, Harold stood up, said something to Ethan, and headed for the door. Before leaving, he paused by the counter and asked Livia, "Have you been baking for a long time?" "Since I was a kid," she replied. "And you really enjoy it?" "More than anything," Livia said honestly. He gave a thoughtful nod, then left without another word. Livia felt sure he still disapproved of her, but at the same time, she sensed that maybe he understood, for the first time, that she wasn't an opportunist, only a hard-working person who loved what she did. Despite that glimpse of a thaw in the tension, news of Ethan's relationship with a baker continued to spread through local social circles. Magazines posted articles about the hotshot heir dating a girl from a bakery, fueling more gossip. Determined to ignore the naysayers, Ethan and Livia spent their evenings together, quietly sharing their future dreams. Livia confided her desire to open a small baking school for kids. Ethan brainstormed ways to support it as a long-term project, even if it wouldn't be as profitable as typical ventures in his world. Finally, on Christmas Eve, Ethan once again came to the bakery, right as Livia was closing. The street was empty, the windows still lit with soft holiday string lights. "I have a gift for you," he said, handing her a box. Inside was a professional mixer, the one Livia had been dreaming about. "I think it'll come in handy when your bakery gets even more popular." She was so moved that tears of gratitude filled her eyes. Gently touching her hand, Ethan added, "You've taught me to appreciate life's simple things. I've realized money and status don't bring real joy if you're not valued for who you truly are." Livia clutched the mixer box, warmth flooding through her. She knew there would be more challenges ahead, given the differences in their status and outlook, but she was no longer afraid. With Ethan beside her, she felt confident enough to face whatever lay ahead. That night, as the clock struck midnight, they set up a small private celebration in Morning Bites, just for the two of them. Livia served fresh coffee, and Ethan popped open a bottle of champagne. In that moment, it felt like no one else mattered. Their love, rooted in honesty and mutual respect, had grown from a mere scratch on a car into something unbreakable. Everything they valued suddenly seemed more precious than money or influential connections. That was the year they learned that true closeness doesn't depend on titles or bank balances. And despite the disapproval swirling around them, their story demonstrated that genuine love can overcome any social barrier. After all, real love is about more than wealth or status. It's about offering mutual support and being willing to compromise for someone you cherish. So if anyone wonders why a wealthy heir chose a simple girl from a bakery, the answer is simple. He saw that behind her flour-stained apron was a heart that loved him, not his wallet. And Livia discovered that, in the upper echelon of society, some people genuinely want to shed their masks, just to be themselves, sincere and real.